Hey, can we talk about a striker who scored a lot of goals this weekend?
If you'd like to, yeah.
Let's do that. Let's move on to Leverkusen and Patrick Schick. Before I think we go talk about Leverkusen and all the goals that scored and how excellent Florian Wirtz was, Fernando Caro with a statement on the kicker report. Our wish is for Florian to play for us as long as possible. It would be great if he stays even until 2026 World Cup, meaning through next season. The likelihood of that happening is obviously high with a contract extension. Therefore, we would very much like to extend his contract. He also says that Wirtz has not signed a contract yet. Sky obviously are loving this. They put this out, right? They asked Caro about this. I know the media in Germany likes to poke each other, suggesting that another media house maybe got a report wrong. Stefan, you and I have talked to Fernando Caro several times. How I'm going to put this politely. I would say everything he says, I wouldn't put it on a gold scale and take it with a big grain of salt. That is, I think, the best way of putting it.
Yeah, he likes to stir. He likes to stir things up. He likes to make statements. He likes to wind people up. I think, he's obviously, it's one of those things in journalism where, the Sky Sports report says, hey, would you like Florian Wirtz to stay at Leverkusen for as long as possible and win lots of trophies? And he's like, yeah, we'd love Florian Wirtz to stay and play at Leverkusen for as long as possible and win loads of trophies. Yeah, of course he's going to stay there. He's not going to say anything else, is he? But yeah, we obviously expect Wirtz to sign a new contract, probably announced next month. And, this game was a perfect example of why they have to keep him. He was, again, just incredible in this game. I think he's getting better with every passing week, to be honest with you. He's now picked up 3 goals in his last 3 games and 6 goals in his last 6 games. 6 assists in his last 6 games. So obviously 9 in total over the course of his last 5 games, which is just honestly incredible. He's playing with this kind of finesse and this freedom and his ability to dribble past players and create chances and score goals. He's untouchable. I mean, that's really the only way I can think about it. He keeps coming up against teams week in, week out. They try to double up on him. They try to stop him, but nobody can really stop him. I think he looks probably in the form of his life, to be honest with you. He looks as good as he ever has been in a Leverkusen top. And, he's dragging this Leverkusen team to the title challenge. They're obviously kind of back on form and lots of other players are doing well. And Patrick Schick's a perfect example of that, who, he looks like a strike. He looks like the kind of striker who should lead the line for a team who are trying to win a league title. I think, I've talked about it before, but when Patrick Schick's fit, I think he's one of the best strikers in Europe, to be perfectly honest with you. And this game is a perfect example of that, with a tremendous kind of lovely little dinged finish for Leverkusen's first, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I think it's just such a fascinating narrative around Leverkusen right now, because people watch this game or watch the highlights and see this kind of assorted group of players who are all at the top of their game, and Leverkusen looking very slick and looking back in form. Everyone's like, yeah, that's the team who won the league last year. It looks like they're determined to do this again. But, obviously that hasn't always been the case, and Leverkusen had a really bumpy start to the season. And it really is, I think, down to Florian Wirtz that Leverkusen are still within touching distance of Bayern Munich, because I think if they didn't have Wirtz scoring and creating the chances that he did at the start of that campaign where, they really struggled, then I think they'd be, they could easily be 5-10 points behind, 10, but easily 5, 6, 7 points further down the table than they are now, around the kind of Mainz Dortmund level. And that's obviously what world-class players do. They add that extra 10% dimension to any team. And at points this season, he has had to win games single-handedly. It's great that Schick's back, and Granit Xhaka is looking back to his best. He's kind of got like his kind of teammates who are obviously helping out, chipping in with the goals and assists now. But I don't know. I just keep coming back to this. I just think Wirtz has just been so incredible this season. And Leverkusen are lucky to have a player like that who, when they're not in form or there's injuries or something else is getting in the way, they have this clutch player who's just there to win them games when they have to, and the comparisons to Lionel Messi are obviously not fair for any player, but it kind of reminds me of Messi at Barcelona, especially the latter years before he left for PSG, where that clearly wasn't the best Barcelona team in the world. They had all sorts of issues, but it still felt like he was the guy who just popped up, scored a free kick from 30 yards, or popped up and set up a goal week in, week out. And it's that kind of magic player power that wins league titles, you know? And it took a world-class player for Leverkusen to win their first league title ever last season. And if they do challenge and they do win this league title again this season, it'll be entirely because of Florian Wirtz again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm in a chat with Musa Okwonka from the one half of the Stadio podcast. Excellent podcast, by the way. And he asked what changed at Leverkusen, why the turnaround, 5 games in a row now won, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let me dig into it. So I did actually write something on this yesterday for Forbes, and I can't stress this enough, but so much of it has to do with the resurgence of Patrick Schick, because Wirtz is excellent, but he was also excellent in the run up to where Leverkusen struggled, right? Like he was the only player that when Leverkusen kind of had these where they drop points 3 times in a row with 3 draws, right? Earlier this season, he was still good. You know, it wasn't because of him. It was because the players around him just weren't quite there. And there's definitely a noticeable moment where Patrick Schick becomes fit again, and this team just gets a second outlet for scoring goals, and it just elevated the entire team. And you know, here's some numbers for you, Stefan. Patrick Schick has now scored every 56 minutes in the Bundesliga this year. In this run, in these 5 games that Leverkusen have won, he has scored 9 goals. He scored 9 out of his 12 goals. And he's more impactful in the Bundesliga this year than Harry Kane and Omar Mamouche. Harry Kane has scored every 75 minutes and Omar Mamouche every 98. I mean, that's a big factor right there. If you have a guy who can stick the ball in the net on a very consistent basis, and you know, every single goal he scored against Freiburg was a typical number 9 goal, wasn't it? Whether it was the header, when he went 1-on-1 with poor Alt Bolo, who's probably going to hear that goal song, that Leverkusen goal song, la shala la la la. He's going to hear that all Christmas break in his head because it just kept on ringing and ringing and ringing. But you know, if you combine Wirtz with a guy who can consistently stick the ball in the net, then that's trouble for any opponent. And you have to remember too, Leverkusen missed a penalty in this match, right? So it could have been even worse. And so, you know, that is a big factor for me. The other big thing is defensively, they have hugely improved. Again, this match was, you know, I cited these numbers in the previous show. They lowered the XG now to 0.89. I had going into this match day. In this game, the XG against them was 0.69. This is from the Bundesliga app. So, you know, it's defensively, they're just far more solid than they were leading up through this 5-game spell. And I think, and I saw it in this game too, the number one reason why they're defensively more stable again is because Granit Xhaka holds this team together now in midfield. And he was not fit. You could see it. And the moment he returned to full fitness, and this has been now 5 games in a row where he has been extremely solid, where his pass rate is the highest in the team, where he just holds the ball better, where he just glues together the attacking line of Schick and Wirtz and all those like really creative players with the defensive line. And that is, I think, a really big thing for me. And the other thing is now too, and you have to remember this, they're now going into a winter break. So whatever bothered Xhaka, he now has even more time to rest and heal from that, right? And I absolutely 100% think that Leverkusen, the way that they've been playing, that 4-point gap to Bayern is virtually nothing, especially because they still have that home game on February 10th against Bayern Munich, right? I think we are going to have a completely open title race now. I think this Leverkusen team is back to playing like Leverkusen. I think they got over the post-European Championship hump that good teams face, right? They have come to terms with playing week in, week out in a Champions League competition that is far more strenuous than it was in years prior. And I think, you know, with Schick now being back at his best, with Xhaka being back at his best, and I personally, I wonder what you think about this, but I also just think that Schick is a way better football player than Boniface. You know, not saying he's a more impactful striker, but I just think he's a better footballer. He does fit the system that Leverkusen try to play with Xabi Alonso, just better than Boniface, who is kind of this like really effective, can be this very effective box striker at times, right? But doesn't really contribute as much to the combination play with Wirtz, etc. And Schick is also a very good football player. He's kind of a little bit like Robert Lewandowski that way. And I think if Schick stays fit, this is going to be an extremely deadly combination for from here to the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of echo that, to be honest. I think the interesting thing between Schick and Boniface is I would say Schick's the better footballer. Technically more gifted. I think he's a better target man. I think he holds up the play better. I think he's a far better finisher as well. I do think Boniface has something about him that's makes him very unpredictable on the football pitch, which is something that can make any striker really exciting. I remember in those games against Bayern Munich, for example, where he's kind of going toe-to-toe with Upamecano, for example, and or Kim or whoever, and he has that physicality and the speed and that unpredictability to really cause problems. And he was great last season for Leverkusen, a huge player for them. But I think he really struggled. He's been really struggling with his fitness this season before, unfortunately, picking up an injury. And when he's not fit, that unpredictability kind of goes away, and then he suddenly just becomes a quite unreliable player. And I think that's what we saw. I mean, I remember when I was at Anfield watching them against Liverpool, and they were more or less playing with a man down because Boniface just didn't have the energy, didn't have the fitness to be that target man. And I think had they had a player like Patrick Schick in the team that day, they would have had a much easier time of getting the ball out of their own half and moving up the pitch. And that's obviously what Schick brings. Another person I want to bring up as well, who I don't think we've really talked about much this season, is Palacios.
Yeah.
He's been start of the season. He obviously missed out with a knee injury. He didn't make his first start until match day 6. But he was also then has some injuries as well in his fitness, and it's only really been in the last kind of 5 or 6 weeks, as well as the Champions League games, where we've seen him really getting a lot of minutes for Leverkusen. And he's such a joy to watch. He's one of these players that I think doesn't really pick up a lot of goals and assists, although he's chipped in a decent amount. He's already got a goal and 4 assists this season, so he's not doing terribly badly in that position. I wouldn't say he's like a number 10, for example. I'd say he's almost like a kind of number 6 in a sense. He's just a really smart player on and off the ball, very tenacious. So he can bring that kind of defensive side that a guy like Robert Andrich brings, but I think he maybe also has a bit more about him in a technical side than maybe Andrich. I know this is something that poor Robert Andrich always gets unfairly labelled as this kind of hatchet man in the box and or in the middle of the pitch, and he can't pass or tackle. He's just this kind of Viking who runs around slashing the knees of opponent players with his axe or something. But I know Andrich's so much more than that. But I think Palacios is a really technically gifted player. He's a really smart player. He knows how to hold on to the ball. He knows how to jink away from defenders. And I think he links up really well with Granit Xhaka. And as you said, Xhaka's back in form. I think it's not a coincidence that we're seeing more of Palacios and Granit Xhaka looking back to his best. So, yeah, it's all roses for Leverkusen. They finished the season looking good, and they know exactly where Bayern are, and they know what they have to do to catch them next season. And as you said, they still got that home game as well, the Bayer Arena. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how both of these teams do, because we've talked a lot about Bayern the last couple of weeks and how much work they're going to have to probably do in January to kind of fix a lot of the holes in this team. Whereas I actually look at this Leverkusen team, and aside from signing a third striker in case Patrick Schick picks up another injury, I actually think they're pretty well placed to deal with all the squads issues that they have. They've got depth where it's needed, and yeah, I think they're actually pretty well placed, assuming no other serious injuries come around.
Yeah, no, and I mean, bottom line is, I think the title race is now Bayern against Leverkusen. There's no one else involved.
Yeah,
Leipzig are out. Frankfurt, I think we really seen the legs, the wheels come off in the last few games. They lose against Mainz, an excellent Mainz side. We talked about this in the previous show. The title race is now firmly between Bayern and Bayer. And I think unlike last year, it's not going to be quite as clear cut. This is going to hopefully go down all the way to the wire, and personally, I don't care who's going to win it in the end. I just want it to last until the very last match day. That's my wish for every single season. I love when the title is decided on the final match day. So hopefully that's what we're going to get, and get an exciting end to the season. Leverkusen now finishing the year 2024 with the most points. That's something that Bayern obviously want to correct in 2025.